Greetings. I'm Latricia Boone, Vice President of the Equality of Opportunity Initiative here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As we begin a new year, I want to thank you all for joining us for the first 2023 event in our Equality of Opportunity in Action series. The U.S. Chamber's Equality of Opportunity Initiative is part of a broad chamber effort to develop real, sustainable solutions to help close race-based opportunity gaps in several areas, including education, employment, entrepreneurship, criminal justice, health, and wealth. This work is driven by data and informed by conversations with leaders in the public and private sectors. We are proud to use this platform to address systemic barriers to opportunity, amplify best practices, and advance solutions at the federal, state, and local levels. Today's event is really special as we pay tribute to the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on what is the national holiday honoring his life, his work, and commitment to equality. Dr. King's dream was not only about ensuring civil rights, but building a more inclusive economy that creates pathways to economic freedom. And today's conversation is timely and it's relevant to the work we do every day through our Equality of Opportunity or EOI agenda. We are excited to honor Dr. King and amplify the progress that's been made, particularly through the leadership of women in the movement. I am truly honored to welcome our special guest, who has dedicated herself to the global fight against inequality and injustice. She is a passionate leader, a humanitarian who has not only helped to keep Dr. King's legacy alive, but through her work is inspiring a whole new generation of leaders to embrace the ideals of peace, justice, and equality and take action. We are so grateful to have her with us today. Without further delay, I want to welcome Mrs. Arndrea Waters King, President of the Drum Major Institute. Arndrea, thank you for taking time out of what I know is a busy, and that is an understatement, schedule to be part of this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for what you all do every day to continue to really feed the flames of peace, justice, and equity.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to jump right in because I know we have, a limited time today together, and I want to make sure we make the most of this conversation. But, today we're not only celebrating Dr. King and his legacy, but also you as an activist and a humanitarian and a woman leader who is driving positive change in the fight against inequality. So to start, can you tell us who is Mrs. Arndrea Waters King and how are you and your family carrying on the legacy of Dr. King?
Oh, wow. What a beautiful question. I think like so many of us, I am many things. I certainly am a wife and a mother. And I really like to believe that I am a humanitarian. Mm-hmm. It is, I believe, my life's work and calling. I worked for many years for an organization that was formerly known as the National Anti-Klan Network, and then morphed into the Center for Democratic Renewal. And that organization monitored extremist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, and skinheads. But we also help communities come together and stand against hate crimes and hate violence. And I had the distinct pleasure and honor to really organizing the first National Hate Crime Summit, because prior to that, every community was monitoring hate crimes in their own community. And it was the very first time that everyone came together and looked at the problem from a global level. And that work, I think, inspired me and became my North Star about the importance and how we truly are stronger together, and the importance of working within coalitions and working with what we have in common and lifting those things up rather than lifting up all the things that can continue to divide us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I really just truly appreciate, your note on, collective action, how we are much stronger together, and we have such opportunity when we see that and work together to make change. And this year marks a number of important anniversaries for Dr. King, for his work and the movement. As you reflect on where we are more than a half century later, what progress do you think we've made? And I say we because I just believe it, to your point, that there's a collective opportunity, and we wouldn't make progress unless we were working in partnership.
Well, I think that I think all of us have felt in some varying degree over the last few years in particular, almost I think people are tired. There have been much to celebrate. I think certainly collectively and even nationally. However, obviously, if nothing else, these past few years they didn't create the fault lines in our society, but they certainly highlighted the fault lines in our society in a very real sense. But I'm going to back up just a bit, because one of the things when we talk about the fact that this year is the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington and the deliverance of the I Have a Dream speech. And in that speech, of course, my father-in-law talked about his 4 children. What we firmly believe at the Drum Major Institute, of which I'm the president, is that the King legacy really belongs to each one of us. And it really is up to each one of us in our own unique and in varying degrees to really, in a very real sense, we each are the dream. And we each have a part in fulfilling and building the beloved community that Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King not only envisioned, but fought so hard for. I really believe that it really is up to each one of us, each generation, to continue to feed the flames of peace, justice, and equity. I also would have to be honest in the assessment that my daughter, Yolanda Renee King, is the only grandchild of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, and she's 14 years old. And in her short lifespan, a lot of the legislation that both of her grandparents worked so hard for her, but not only for her, for all generations, in a very real sense, she has less rights than the day that she was born. And so I can't imagine what Martin Luther King Jr. or Coretta Scott King would say about that. What we really stand and believe for is that we should stand for laws that not limit us, but really lift us all up, and all of us to do our part and lean in to create a society, again, where peace and justice and equity reign, where the triple evils that Martin Luther King Jr. coined them, of racism, of poverty, and violence, are once and forevermore eliminated from our society.
Wow. You said so many things that really hit home to me. And Juan, let me thank you for lifting up Mrs. Coretta Scott King's name in this conversation, because we talk about women as change agents, and we would be remiss if we really didn't talk about not only what she did when Dr. King was alive to support the work, but also even to carry his legacy forward. And then also,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So mindful today of all days of who and what Coretta Scott King contributed to our nation and our world.
Yep.
Because if it weren't for her, we would not have a federal holiday honoring Martin Luther King Jr., which, again, this is not about the man. It is about honoring his ideals, yep, not idolizing him. An idol is something that you come and take off once a year and dust it and put it away. But this is a time every year for us to assess and see how can we live up to those ideals. But if it weren't for Coretta Scott King, we would not have federal holiday. And when you think about a woman that literally changed the course of our history, this year will be 40 years since the King holiday was signed into legislation. 1986 was when it became law, but it was signed in 83. That was the direct work and advocacy of Coretta Scott King. But moreover than that, she was already an activist when she met Martin Luther King Jr. She was a peace activist and actually involved in the peace movement in a very real sense, even before her husband. So it was a natural extension for her to continue that work, even certainly while they were living. They were partners in raising funds and the direction of the civil rights movement. But afterwards as well, not only with the legislation, but the fact that she continued to work for fairness for all and equal pay. And she continued to work and speak for LBGT rights and women's rights. And the list goes on and on and on. But she was a tremendous force of nature and did it all with such grace and love.
Absolutely. And you really answered in so many ways the follow-up question I was gonna share, which was really around like women's leadership. But I think, talking about Mrs. King and the work that she did and carried forward and was doing even before, there's so many leadership lessons in that around the grace and the love, but actually taking things forward and taking action and inspiring others. So I think the only thing I would say or ask, I think, around that is, as you're a mom of a 14-year-old young woman, I'm a mom of a 12-year-old. So I think we're in a very similar space as we're raising these young ladies. And you talked about rights being, rolled back and things of that nature. And as we think about these young women who are, I'm not even going to say the leaders of tomorrow, because I feel like I've seen your daughter and I know what my daughter, they're the leaders of today. Like in many ways, they're leading us.
Yeah.
And so what do you think we can do? Not just women, because I think we all have a role to play, but as we think about women's leadership and cultivating and continuing the work that Mrs. King did, the work that you're doing and the work that our daughters are even now doing, how do we keep that momentum? What can we do to ensure that women's leadership can continue to show up in the spaces where it needs to advance the ideals that Dr. King really brought to us?
Well, I think first and foremost, one of the hardest thing I think as women, but even all of us, is to take care of ourselves. There's a lot of talk, I think, more than ever about mental health and self-care, but that's very real. We have to remember that what we're embarking on is not a sprint, but it is a marathon. And in that sense, we have to continue to take care of ourselves first and foremost so that we can continue to be there for others. Another thing that we talk about in our home is that real queens straighten each other's crowns. And so it's very important as women in particular, I'm talking to women now, not to leave anyone else out, but that we support each other and that we continue to network and lift each other up and there for each other in all an abundance of ways. I think also it's important to continue to seek. You have to find a way to continue to renew and refresh yourself, and also to remember, in a very real sense, that it literally almost is a daily occurrence. You have to choose which of the two wolves that we're going to feed any day. And what I mean by that is I talk a lot about, the tale of two wolves. And in that, a little girl goes to her grandmother and says, grandmother, there are the two wolves inside of me that are fighting. And, one is angry and upset and critical. And the other one is loving and peaceful. And I don't know, I feel like there is this turmoil inside of me and I'm not sure which one will win. And then the grandmother quietly, took her time and looked her granddaughter in the eye and said, the wolf in which you feed. And so we have a choice every single day of which wolf we feed. And it's really up to us to continue to feed that wolf of love and peace and leadership and strength and power. And also, I will also say one of the things for me that also fortifies is also to continue to make sure that we are connected with those that have gone before us. Not this work is really about it's not about collective guilt, but it is about collective responsibility. And there have been so many that have paved the way for us, both known and some names that we will never know. But to continue to educate ourselves on those and those sacrifices and to find inspiration, those are the things that inspire us when the going gets tough for us, as it does with each one of us.
Absolutely. I think that is that was powerful what you just said, and hopefully many who are watching can relate to. I know for me, I often spend time just saying the names of my grandmothers and my grandfathers and those who came before, because who I did not know or meet, but also know that their legacy lives on in me and the future generations, and there's an opportunity to really honor and respect what they've brought. And so I kind of want to move us.
Because I firmly believe that each one of us is an answered prayer to an ancestor, someone that we don't, some we may know, some we don't know, but each one of us, we all are. If you're listening within the sound of my voice, you are an answered prayer to someone.
That's beautiful. Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I know one of your key initiatives is the Drum Major Institute, which you are president of and doing some great work there. And I'd love for our audience to learn more about, what the Drum Major Institute is and the impact you're having and hope to continue to have through this organization.
Well, the Drum Major Institute, we take our name actually from the last sermon that Martin Luther King Jr. ever delivered at Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Atlanta, Georgia on February 4th. And in that sermon, he talked about a life well lived. And he actually, in the end of that sermon, he talked about how he wanted to be remembered. He talked about his death. He talked about wanting to be remembered. He talked about that there's an instinct in all of us to be, this drum major instinct where we want to be out front leading the parade. But how he wanted to be remembered was not for his PhD, nor for his Nobel Prize or any of his, honorary degrees or the vast honors that he received, but he wanted to be remembered as a drum major for peace, as a drum major for justice, and a drum major for love. And then on April 4th, he was assassinated. And when Coretta Scott King was putting together his funeral, she, from the vast speeches and writings and, so many things, but she chose that excerpt to play at his funeral. It actually was the last thing that was played at the funeral. So in a very real sense, he eulogized himself with that. And we at the Drum Major Institute believe that that call is our pursuit. And we want to help do our part in creating a world where the triple evils are eliminated and where peace, justice, and equity reign. One of the ways in which we are doing that now is we certainly do it through education. We do it through advocacy. And we also have a coalition that we formed just a few months ago where we are supporting who we feel are the most impactful and innovative Black and Brown advocacy groups on the ground that may not be nationally known or as of yet, but that with the correct funding and the correct foundational resources, that they really can be we feel that they are the Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Coretta Scott Kings. And so we are finding a way to fund their work so that they can be even more impactful.
That's great. I mean, I love to hear that you all are investing in these leaders and really bringing visibility to the work that they're doing so that they can, because they are the ones who are going to carry that legacy forward in so many ways. When you talked about we all have an opportunity to do so. And as I think about folks who are listening in and on this call today or this conversation, and especially even our young people who, I hesitate. Sometimes we say the next generation, but they are the generation. How do we prepare folks to truly take the mantle of carrying Dr. Dr. King's legacy forward and the work that they're doing, whether they're like the folks that you all are investing in, or folks who are just every day trying to think about how I can show up and do this work in a meaningful way.
Well, first and foremost, I think that it's imperative for each one of us to know and see ourselves in a very real sense as the heirs of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, to really know and understand that their work was really for each and every single one of us. I really believe that the generation that is coming up now truly is one of the greatest generations that we have seen. And I have no doubt that they are going to continue to lift up the banners of peace, justice, and equity. But I would encourage them to make sure that they also are educated in the principles of Martin Luther King Jr., in the principles of nonviolence, to truly understand nonviolence. I think there's always this ongoing discussion of what nonviolence is and what it isn't, and the difference between pacifism being, there's always a lot of confusion. But one of the things that we know is that it truly is a technology, but it's a technology that works. It is what Martin Luther King used. He learned a lot of it, of course, from Mahatma Gandhi, who talked about it's a movement that's powered by a soul force. Gandhi called it satyagraha. It's something inside of us that continues for us to really reach and aspire higher and higher, not only for us, and not only for individual, but for all of us. Again, it's a realization that this work is not about collective guilt, but it is about collective responsibility. And so for the young people to really listen, I think, particularly this time of year and all year, actually, you kind of get a sample of Martin Luther King Jr. Like it's a buffet. So you'll sample here and there, but to truly take a moment, and even as a families, together and truly listen to some of his speeches, listen to the mountaintop speech, or I Have a Dream, or read the letter from the Birmingham jail. And those in particular I'm mentioning because this year in 2023, there are a lot of highlighted anniversaries. In April, it will be 55 years since Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. This summer, it'll be 60 years from the Birmingham movement and letter from the Birmingham jail, which is truly one of the most powerful written pieces I think any of us will ever read. And particularly when you think about the history and how all of that was done, on the margins of the newspapers and toilet paper that was snuck out of jail, how Dr. King wrote that beautiful letter in response to criticism. And then, of course, in August, it will be 60 years from the March on Washington and deliverance of I Have a Dream. And we at the Drum Major Institute hope to realize a whole year-long worth of activity to really, in a very real sense, bring us together as a nation, to really look where we are in relation to realizing the dream, and also for us to fully stand in our own power and know that each one of us, that we are the dream. So I would love for young people to get involved with us in a lot of these campaigns that we're doing, and for families to come together and to really read some of these works and listen to the speeches and see how you're led in your own way to continue the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King.
You again, as you have throughout this conversation, just touched on so many things, and a couple of things I'm going to pull out because I just want to underscore it as you said it. And one is around, this is really about 365 days of the year, and not, we're grateful to have the holiday and the opportunity to commemorate, but there's so much that we can be doing. And I think the chance to reflect, take a step back, learn, truly take those lessons and leadership lessons from what Dr. King shared, whether it be through his speeches or whether it be through the letter from the Birmingham jail or a multitude of other written pieces that he has. And so I just want to underscore that because I think it's so important as we have this conversation today that it's not just about this moment, but it is really about the opportunity to continue to carry that legacy forward. And I think as I say that, I lead into my next question, which is, I've talked about the U.S. Chamber's equality of opportunity agenda, where we really have committed to leveraging the collective muscle of the business community to help close race-based opportunity gaps in a number of areas that ultimately we believe will drive economic inclusion. And thinking about the work of Dr. King, your work, the work of Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and the legacy, what do you believe that an organization like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the business community can do more of to support that shared vision for equality of opportunity and economic growth for all people?
I think first and foremost, it's very interesting to even think about the fact that whether you're talking about certainly the US, or even when you look at freedom movements around the world, most of the leaders of those movements actually came from middle class or upper middle class families, even though they certainly were impacting all of us. And the reason that I bring that up is because there is a certain freedom in having financial freedom. And so, the business community also were strong supporters of the civil rights movement that, certainly if it weren't for the business community, in a very real sense, it helped propel the movement. So I think it's imperative for the business community to continue to find ways, first, to make it an equitable society. I think we can't forget that Dr. King's last campaign was the Poor People's Campaign, and he was talking about a livable wage for all people. So I think that certainly there is a lot to be done within the system economically in ways, and to look at ways in which we all do good together and we do better. I mean, there are so many studies that show that you can do well and do good at the same time. I think really looking at business as opposed to, for far too long for some, it has been coming to the table as an opposition, rather than seeing how doing good in the world is doing good for business. And I also think it's a continual practice to really look around the business table and community, and making sure that there are diverse voices at the table. Again, studies show that when you have a diverse voices that are involved, it actually strengthens your business. It doesn't diminish. And so I think that certainly the business community has a lot to do in fathering truly equity and justice. I just earlier last week, and I'm from Florida originally, so this certainly resonates closely with me, but it was the 100th anniversary of Rosewood in Florida. And a lot of people it still amazes me how many people don't know that history. But basically you had an African-American, a whole town that was wiped out within a matter of days. But when you really think about the fact that all of the land that was taken, all of those businesses that were destroyed, and how many generations were impacted by that. And so, again, I think when we're looking at equity and we're looking at business through the lens of what's right and what's just, that it behooves us to find a way to, again, that this is not about collective guilt, but it certainly is about collective responsibility, and to continue to find ways to offer the most opportunity for the most people, and to also have an understanding of those that have been left out for far too long. Whether you're certainly talking about the African-American population, we're talking about women, we're talking about immigrants, we're talking about so many of us this is what makes the greatness of our society. And so to make sure that we're continuing to have equity within that space, but also making sure and understanding how that impacts the business and the bottom line in a positive way. And it's right. Let's just get back to doing what's right. This is a moral universe, so let's also, it's what we teach our kids. I would imagine most of us, and so like let's look at leadership in a way and in a expanded version, and look at business in an expanded version, and really usher in an entire new way of doing things.
I mean, you really hit it there as well. And I think we often talk about the fact that it's a moral imperative, it's a business imperative. And so we are continuously and committed to, as I said, working with our vast network to ensure that we're moving those pieces forward in so many different ways. And look forward to continuing to work with you and the Drum Major Institute to do so as well. So I know we're getting close to the end of our conversation, but I just have a couple more questions for you in this conversation, which I am just so inspired by and motivated, really, as a part of this conversation. But
I'm motivated by you and what you all do.
Thank you.
That's why when I was invited, the answer was immediate yes. So.
And we so appreciate that because I knew that this would be a great conversation, but it really has come together in such a beautiful way. So I thank you. But Arndrea, you're a wife, you're a mom, you're a businesswoman, a change maker in your own right. And frankly, as like I could just say, you're an inspiration to me, but you're an inspiration to many women based on the work that you do and continue to do. What I'd like to know is, who are the women who inspire you?
There's so many. I certainly would, of course, start with Coretta Scott King, who is such a tremendous woman and whom I miss dearly every day. And my mother, who passed away in 2019, and she was a registered nurse in Live Oak, Florida, small town. She was the first Black registered nurse, but she was a tremendous example of service and love. She was just an extraordinary human being. And again, I'm so privileged to have had her for a mother and miss her every day. Also, when I talked about my work at the National Anti-Klan Network, that organization was started by two people. One was Reverend C.T. Vivian, who a lot of people were first introduced to him because he actually died the same day that John Lewis passed away, but I mean, a tremendous soul. And also Ann Braden. And Ann Braden is not a name that, in my estimation, is still known enough. And Ann Braden was this white Southern woman from Kentucky. She actually was mentioned in the letter from the Birmingham jail as a white Southerner that was in the movement for peace and justice for all of us. And from the 50s up until her death a few years ago, she was on the front lines of continuing to build a better world for all of us. And I take inspiration from her, and a unique honor that I was mentored by her and CT, that, people that actually changed the course of our nation and world. So this is not just an experiment of what may be. I've had the unique privilege and honor of touching people that show what can and will be. And I'm very blessed to have, a wonderful network of friends. And I have to say, my daughter inspires me as well. She's I'm sure very much like your daughter, is a firecracker and a leader. And she certainly keeps us on our toes and keeps us honest. But those, and Maya Angelou, again, I think we kind of know her as a author and lecturer, but she truly was a brilliant woman in so many ways. And she was a civil rights activist. She actually ran SCLC, the organization that Martin Luther King Jr. Worked under in New York. So there are just so many. But I'm also, this is a long answer, inspired by in our line of work, I also come across a lot of women and mothers in particular that have lost children to hate violence or to racism, and I'm always struck by the mothers who use that the most painful um, experience that any of us can imagine, in some kind of way, fostering that pain into some type of power and purpose. And so I'm always inspired by women and mothers who have gone through the toughest, most horrific things that any of us can imagine, and yet are still every single day working for all of us. And it's those women that give me the most inspiration and hope and strength.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I feel the same way, and I've had the opportunity to hear, um, a few of those mothers speak and be in community with them, and I felt the same way as you in terms of the inspiration. So, on some of my most difficult days, I think about those who have really gone through some tough experiences, and yet continue to advance the work that they're doing, and really have turned those tough experiences, like you say, into opportunities to fight for others. So that's huge. And I think if there's any lesson in this conversation today, it's around how we do bring that grace and that commitment and be in service to others, even as we are, working through our own things. So I really appreciate you saying that. And again, I'm just so grateful for this conversation and the opportunity to speak with you, hear from you, and take away some of those leadership lessons. So I want to say thank you again. And it's really a sincere thank you to the entire King family for all that they have done, you all have done, and what you're doing to sustain the legacy and to move us closer to realizing true equality of opportunity for all. We are excited to continue to work with you to advance this mission. As I said before, we are committed to carrying this beyond a conversation today, but to ensure we are actually doing the work to break down those barriers, to drive action, to invest in those who are doing the work, and really, be able to carry that mantle forward with the future generation. You talked about your daughter being a firecracker. Mine absolutely is. But it's conversations like this, I think, that also help guide those young voices as they are thinking about their space in the world. So for those who are watching today, I hope you will join us in this work. And as we commemorate the King holiday, let's make our own commitment to be in service and carry forward the leadership lessons Dr. King, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and this family have gifted to us. To learn more about the Equality of Opportunity Initiative and how you can partner or engage with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in this work, I encourage you to visit our website, and let's work together to build an inclusive economy and realize the true progress for the business community and for our nation, really. Thank you.